Okay, I believe we're live. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Francesca Dubrock, and I'm the Chief Curator at the Anchorage Museum. The Anchorage Museum is situated on Dena'ina homeland. We would like to offer our gratitude for centuries of Dena'ina care and for their ongoing leadership and stewardship of these beautiful lands and waters. In October, we opened How to Survive, which is an exhibition that considers the idea of survival through hope and care and asks how gestures and practices of love, protection, nurturing, and sharing can help us face the climate crisis. It includes work by 16 artists from across the globe, as well as an installation of cultural belongings from our collection, a community climate archive, and a materials library. It was conceived both as an exhibition to think about climate challenges in a more hopeful and aspirational way, but also as an opportunity to experiment on the museum practice side of things with the way we make exhibitions and try to find more sustainable working practices, materials, and approaches. Today, we're really lucky to have 4 extraordinary artists with us: Mary Mattingly, Jaimey Hamilton Faris, Jenny Irene Miller, and Jen Stever Ruckel. All of these artists consider care for waters and communities in myriad ways through their artworks and practices. So I'm going to introduce all 4 artists, so bear with me here as I read their bios, and then we'll get to the fun part where they actually talk about their work. So Mary Mattingly creates images and sculptures about imagined futures she calls proposals. Her practice is grounded in a desire to reframe human relationships to land, water, and one another, creating spaces where regenerative, cooperative, and future-forward thinking can grow and thrive. Mary's artwork has been shown at institutions such as Storm King Art Center, Palais de Tokyo in Paris, Seoul Art Center, and the International Center of Photography, the Brooklyn Museum, the Barbican Art Gallery, and the Museo Nacional de Bellas Artes in Havana. Jaimey Faris is an associate professor of contemporary art and theory at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. She is affiliate faculty in Pacific Island Studies, International Cultural Studies, and the Institute for Sustainability and Resilience. She's involved in the Political Ecology Research Group and FERN, Feminist Environmental Research Network. Her research focuses on creative approaches to local, global infrastructures and ecologies, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. She is currently working on Liquid Futures, Water, Art, and Feminism about hydrofeminist representations of climate change and climate justice in contemporary art. Jenny Irene Miller is a Inupiaq, originally from Nome, Alaska, and currently living and working in Anchorage. Working primarily with photography, her practice focuses on identity, community, place, refusal, and access. Jenny holds an MFA in photography from the University of New Mexico, a BFA in photo media, and a BA in American Indian Studies from the University of Washington. She is a past Beaumont Newhall Van Daren Koch Photography Fellow at University of New Mexico, a Site Santa Fe Scholar, an Elizabeth Ferber Fellow, and a Fulbright Canada Killam Fellow. Her work has been exhibited internationally and featured in Inuit Art Quarterly, the New York Times, National Geographic, Canadian Art, and Lens Scratch, among others. Earlier this year, photographs she took of the model and climate activist Quanah Chasing Horse were featured on the cover of Outside magazine. Yay. Then we have Jen Stever. They are an Inupiaq and queer writer, mom, artist, and proud nerd. They grew up splitting their time between the San Francisco Bay Area and Alaska. They live in Anchorage with their husband, daughter, and 2 dogs, and are a graduate of the University of Alaska Anchorage's Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing and Literary Arts program. Jen writes poetry and fiction. Their micro chapbook of poetry, Imuk and Cookies, was published in 2020 by Kissing Dynamite Poetry. Jen was a writer in residence at the Anchorage Museum, where they wrote their second poetry collection, Postcards from Inuiagjik. Their novel manuscript, Lost Son of Fire, won a 2020 Jason Wegner Art Award for Excellence in Creative Writing from the University of Alaska Anchorage, and their flash fiction, Panagik, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize by Alaska Women Speak. So we are very lucky to have all of these amazing people here to speak with us today. They're each going to share about their work briefly, and then we're going to try and have about 20 to 30 minutes at the end of the program for dialogue and questions. So these are really meant to be kind of informal and open spaces for people to interact with the artists. So I really encourage people to type questions you have for the artists in the chat, and we'll make sure to get those to the artists in the second half of the program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mary.
Okay, thanks, Fran. And it's a privilege to be here with artists I admire and respect. I'm gonna share my screen and yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening to this brief presentation on mainly the River Lab, but also I wanted to talk about what I've been working on now. But I'll start with an introduction about water. I've always considered water, food, and home to be crucial investigations in my work. I grew up outside of New York City and had a mixed relationship with water there, between caution and concern, and appreciation and joy. The well water that was available there was contaminated with agricultural runoff, which really made me aware of the negative impact of industrial farming practices on drinking water and human health all over the world now. So water was my first subject. It's been my biggest teacher, and it's what ties everything together in my practice, certainly. And it's also become a metaphor, I think, to help me express interiority outwardly. So the interiority of the living system and the delicate functioning of my own body, which has often felt like it's been on life support, but also the interiority of spirit and how it's shared through celebrating water. And this project is called Public Water. So outwardly, it referred to watershed stewardship and sharing responsibilities for caring for water as part of a commons in New York State. And then water on swale, which is a floating food forest aboard a barge. I think it helped me and hopefully others see differently. So when you're on board the water pod on this structure that looked like land and kind of felt like land, but was constantly moving with water's motion, it enabled a perspective shift in me as a way maybe to think about seeing the entire city differently, maybe as a space of possibility, maybe as a space of tension, but just differently, I think. And I wanted to maybe just start with this early slide from River Lab. This is really the history of this project, which began alongside of this lending library called Ecotopian Library in around 2017, 2018. It started because of a public art and collaboration course that I was able to teach at the University of Hartford. We were tasked with focusing on a project for or on or with broadly the Park River, which was buried in the 1940s. So this is a photograph from the archives of Hartford showing these tunnels being built to contain the Park River underground to restrict it from contributing to the flooding in the city center. And we determined that like a way to bring all of our individual skills together as students and professors into something collective was to build a toolkit that could be used as a way to sense a river differently. So we devised this, at first, both physical and web-based toolkit. You have to imagine, unfortunately, the physical toolkit right now, because I didn't have an image of it, but it included a handmade glass spoon, a mirror, prose to read at the river, water maps through little water vials, and a river foraging guide that students contributed to. And then it took a while to come to this text as this group, but it still informs the project today, and it includes these statements that I think are really relevant still to complicate and reconsider readings of the river, to connect people to ecosystems and dismantle the idea that people are disconnected from nature, and the line that says to respond and acknowledge ephemeral, impermanent, transmutating time cycles, which I think is what I'm still trying to muddle my way through in other projects. So the second time this course was able to run, it further delved into the archives, and we were able to host these public design charrettes and for nature walks around the exposed parts of the river, animal habitats, and we the students located an archive that had included a public artwork that had since been buried near the Park River. It was from the artist Ellen Zimmerman, who was able to come to Hartford to unearth it with us and to resituate it as like a desire line from their library to the Park River. And that whole process, the bureaucratic process and the labor involved, constituted an exhibition that they were able to do. And I think that's when the project started to form and become maybe something bigger. Then right after that, we're in the COVID pandemic, and the River Lab was one thing that came from that time of being online was River Lab expanded. We worked through Zoom, more people contributed to it. It became a solely web-based toolkit for sensing rivers at home, near home. So these are just some quick examples of artists who, in this case, Tara Long interviewed the river she was nearby. Aubrey Murdoch proposed a series of small shelters for the Meadowlands where you could, she hoped to see these videos that would reconnect disconnected and fragmented terrain. This artist was trying to understand line and measure through a process of walking and looking for these informal markers to inform a walking path, found concrete and cracks in the concrete that were utilized as maps. And that prompt of the river as a line became a recurring one because then I was able to work with Jaimey Faris, who's here very closely. And Jaimey introduced me to the work of architect Dilip Dacuna, who says that a river is not a line. And by this, he broadly meant a river is a name that's been applied to a part of a water cycle. And when it's articulated as a line on a map, it's very misleading. And he comments that you never see map surveyors working in the rain because the river disappears. And I love thinking through that and understanding water in that way. And then to sort of bring us up to right before the Anchorage Museum, I was able to get a grant to build a mobile river lab on a river to share tools with people passing by. So this is a temporary exhibition where a lot of these tools that were made online for the web space were articulated physically, and a sketch of a kiosk that was supposed to resemble a water clock was changed by the artist Julie Chen, who rendered it as a wave. And here it is next to a painting of the river by Sarah Rutherford, a mirrored cloud by the artist Rebecca Zablocki near Monica Kapoor's photographs, which are also in the Anchorage exhibition. This is Billy Lee's poem about a dream and mugwort plant next to Justin Moore's listening tube that was connected directly to the river. And some workshops were able to happen. This is Catherine Cook doing a workshop called A River is a Vessel, where people made a clay pot and etched words into it that they wanted to share about the river that she later stitched onto fabric. Sea level rise maps and historic river images, musical river scores are included in this iteration of River Lab. And then I just wanted to share how it's inspired my personal work. So I began making these installations that explored the water cycle. I was nearby more directly, and at some point I recognized them or wanted to recognize them as water clocks. And I think the River Lab really helped me more contemplatively respond to first the storm surges that had left me at this point in time without a safe apartment, and so many other people, and left me thinking about ways that water has drastically altered people's lives. And I made this sort of sketched out this reoccurring dream of a deconstructed apartment building that was reminiscent of the one that I was leaving. And here you could hear the rhythmic drops of salt water from the scaffolding system. Well, saltwater futures could, I hope, be examined. So there are a lot of salt-tolerant halophyte plants within this sculpture that actually were able to stay in the park after the project. They were to show what edibles could be grown with more saltwater inundation and influx of storms. And then finally, I just wanted to show this earlier water clock and read a quote from Ostreda Nemanis, who talks about radically embodied hydrocommons that might be suited for negotiating the bodies of water on this planet. So I'll just read this quote while we can hear some of the water clock sounds, and then I'll end there. There's a glass of water on the table beside you. You pick it up and take a sip. This water will feed your blood and nourish your muscles, cradle your organs, and serve as vital conduit and communicator between your furthest flung bodily outposts. But it will not remain yours for long. This water will leave you, spreading across your skin when you sweat, rolling down your cheeks when you cry, and expressing your ecstasy when you love. It will begin its journey to the filtration plant the next time you go to the bathroom. And in all of these leave takings, this water will carry small meanings and materialities of you with it. Which of your emotions will be diverted or damned when this water is converted into hydroelectric power, displacing the caribou and the Cree? Which of your senses will dry up as this water is relentlessly extracted from its centuries-old home in an underground aquifer northwest of Toronto? Which of your movements will be squeezed from the earth along with this water so that they may be bottled and sold by those who claim ownership? All of this biology, all of this chemistry, all of this affect, politics, economics, and ethics, all of this is in that glass of water from which you sip. And I'll stop there. Thank you so much. Stopping. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was beautiful. I think the plan was next to go to Jenny. Jenny, do you have an image you'd like to share? Did that come through?
Sure, yeah. I have a few images, so I'll go ahead and just share that. Thank you. All right, and can you all see that? Okay, cool.
Yes, we can see it. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, great. So I was able to find this piece. This is, hi everyone, to begin with, I'm Jenny Irene Miller, as Fran had shared, and I'm very grateful to be part of How to Survive and contribute a piece to the River Lab. Right here on this image, you can see my piece is actually not physically on the River Lab, but it's two photographs, and this piece is called How do we tell stories of place when that place is gone after Typhoon Merbok? So I'm an artist who primarily works with photography, and I'm constantly thinking about place and thinking about where I grew up, and also in relation to my culture and my background as an Inupiaq person. So I first kind of wanted to talk about the importance of water to myself as an Inupiaq person. And so as Inupiaq people, we are water peoples. Our communities are often found near waterways from the seas around us, different rivers, and our food sources come from the land, waters, and skies. So I've been fascinated by water, and having been born in Nome, Alaska, and being adjacent to the Bering Sea, and then being raised in both Nome and Fairbanks, I was also interested in the Chino River in Fairbanks. And I've also been thinking heavily about how I'm in relationship with the waters around me, no matter where I live, and thinking about how they provide and share stories too. And so I'm thinking about this, and this can be either through past photographic projects or thinking about place and home. For example, my past project, Where the Tundra Meets the River, which was my primary focus for my MFA thesis, I was thinking about home from afar in this place where the tundra meets the ocean, where our Inupiaq stories are from and where they continue to be formed. So I'll kind of go through this a bit. And if I move this, sorry, it's like I've never used Zoom for a while. I'm just trying to figure out how to have this also in addition to be able to read my notes that I wrote. When I scoot this window over, are you able to see it in the preview of my notes?
We can see the image with the flowers in the fish camp, and then just a small like page view on the left, but we can't see any of your notes.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you, Fran. Thanks, everyone. So I also wanted to go into, I guess I'm kind of wondering if I should go deeper into this or wait for another section.
I think do what feels right. This is pretty open-ended, so however you want to talk about it
Okay.
is fine.
Okay. Sure. I guess I'll dive deeper into this piece since this is what we have, and I'll go show you the closer version of kind of how they're finished and framed, and then I'll land on this closer image because I feel like that's very tender. So again, this piece is called How to Tell Stories of Place When That Place Is Gone. And the description shares a lot more about this piece, and I'll go ahead and read that because I think it gives a deeper context to this. This diptych reflects on my family's connection to our fish camp at Fort Davis near my hometown of Nome, Alaska. Fort Davis is a significant place to my family and other Inupiaq families who also started their fish camps here. My late great-grandparents, the late Helen and Willie Sinungatuk, chose this location in the early 1950s after moving to Nome from our village of origin, Kinnigan, known more commonly as Wales, Alaska. My mom spent her childhood at this fish camp, and I spent my childhood summers there. It was the last physical structure that connected me to my late great-grandparents. Not only did Typhoon Merbok in the Bering Sea sweep away our aging fish camp, but it also changed the composition of the native allotment land my great-grandparents picked out. What was once a significant amount of land and beach where my family brought in their fish nets, prepared traditional foods for the winter, where I played as a child, and where we shared stories over a campfire is now only a small area of beach. This altered space cannot accommodate a new fish camp due to the loss of land, the increase of intense storms, changes in the mouth of the Nome River, which is also cutting away land in an unpredictable ocean. Climate change is altering the places we as Indigenous people once knew as being part of us and our ways of life. So how do we tell stories of place when that place is gone? And so thinking more about this piece and thinking about the medium of photography, one of my favorite things about the medium is reading a picture and how a successful image has the power to draw the viewer in. So as you see on the left is an image of the Bering Sea, which I actually made this image just days before Typhoon Merbok hit in September of 2022. And then this image on the right. But I love how when reading a photograph, it can pull me in and I can carefully read the entire image. And I'm especially grateful for when there's moments of what some call gifts for the viewers. So I'm considering some of my little gifts to be these flowers and this tender image of my family members. And thinking about how reading these images alongside each other is almost like a poem. And I've been thinking about this in my own practice. Again, the image on the left is of the Bering Sea. And it's larger than the image on the left intentionally because I'm always considering scale and presentation. And I wanted the image to pull the viewer in and out of viewing this piece, similar to the waves of the Bering Sea, and to communicate the vastness of the ocean. And the smaller remixed archival family photograph is intentionally printed small to relate to communicating to a sense of tenderness and thinking about, again, the vastness of the ocean and the story that I shared with you about our fish camp being washed away. And I'll kind of leave it right there for now, and hopefully there will be some good questions that arise. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Jenny. That was lovely. All right, we're going to go over to Jen now.
Hi, I'm gonna kind of give a little bit of context and introduction, and then at the end I'll sort of share some pictures of my contribution. But I'm Jen Stever. I am a Inupiaq artist, and I have short black hair, and I am wearing glasses and a collared green sweater. I am super excited to share this virtual stage with all of you guys today, and especially to follow another Inupiaq artist. I am primarily a writer. I did my MFA in fiction, but I do a lot of work in poetry, and that's been more of my focus in the public square for the last few years. I also do quite a bit of visual art as well. And a couple years ago, I took up photography. And all of those elements are often in conversation with one another, loosely or closely, as they are in my contribution to River Lab. My poetry has had elements of my Inupiaq culture, passing the torch to my daughter. And more recently, a lot of my work has had a land and environment focus. My second collection that's wrapping up postcards from me in Nunavik is poems and photos with those themes in mind. So when Mary and the rest of the team reached out and approached about contributing to River Lab and creating these tools to explore different ways of experiencing water, I was kind of brainstorming and I kept coming back to my daughter, Kameluk, and I had the idea that I wanted the sort of different lens of viewing rivers to come from her eyes. So we went on adventures together and went to water places, and I started writing down lines she would say to herself while playing. And then I rearranged those lines into these short found poems. I then paired those poems with photos I had taken from the places where we'd gone on our adventures. Ice fishing on Cheney Lake, Portage Creek, Peters Creek, Chadadnu, which is the Dena'ina name for the Matanuska River, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But anyway, in the process, Kameluk decided, who was 4 at the time, she decided on her own that she wanted to have a more active role in the project. I didn't ask anything of her initially, except to sort of go on these outdoor adventures with me that we normally do anyway. And she really loves to do because she loves to play outside. But she was interested in what I was doing, and she wanted to help more. So she ended up making some digital art, and we ultimately combined that into combined that with the photos and the poems. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and just share. So hopefully you guys can see this image. But this is one of the 4 pieces. So ultimately the 4 pieces we ended up with were icy, fishy, rivery, boaty, and this one, which is titled Rocky River. This one came from Portage Creek. My daughter named all of the pieces in case you couldn't tell. But I think she kind of has a knack for it. But all of these basically ended up, I wanted things to be a little informal, kind of a kids art vibe, rather than something that was like sort of like overly formal. And I guess sort of in the process, my biggest fear was that people would look at the work that we produced and sort of scoff at it for being juvenile. But it was sort of like an honest view from our eyes. And so far the feedback, when we did the exhibition launch and everything, it's been really wholesome and overall really wonderful. So this is another one of the images. Hopefully you can see this one, rivery. So I just took these little line snippets of things she said to herself when she was playing and sort of combined them into these short poems. This one here, Icy Fishy, is on the left, the scales of a rainbow trout we caught ice fishing, and on the right is a sequined t-shirt that my daughter was wearing on one of our adventures. And then the last one here, also from the Matanuska River, I managed to catch a moment when she threw a snowball into the river off the bridge. And then she had also drawn a boat that she plays with in the bathtub. So that's what came from that. Yeah, so looking forward to hearing questions and hearing about from Jaimey.
Thank you, Jen. I love those images so much. The images and words. It's wonderful. All right, Jaimey, you take it away.
Aloha, everyone, from Hawaii. I've lived and worked here in Honolulu at the University of Hawaii for about 18 years. I'm a Malahini settler on this island, and I consider it my responsibility to remind folks of Hawaii's recent history, especially on large platforms like this. That Hawaii was illegally annexed from the Kingdom of Hawaii by the American government in 1898. And this fact grounds my commitment to be in Piliina or connected to Kanaka and Pacific Islander communities who are working to reestablish their own connection to lands and waters. And this has really informed my own practice as a teacher, as a writer, and as an artist, an expansive artist, if I could consider myself one. And my path towards participating in River Lab has happened through a few parallel streams over the course of the last 5 years. I feel like, Mary, that we've collaborated together. It's been really nice to see the development of these projects and see this new iteration in the Anchorage Museum. That first path or stream has been through teaching. I teach ecological art and art writing at both University of Hawaii and at New Mexico through the low residency confluence program that Mary co-directs. And I had the opportunity, as Mary mentioned, to kind of learn from her how she approaches infusing the desire to connect to a water body in a collaborative process like River Lab. And I think that's what's so beautiful about it, is that it allows everyone to kind of have a voice and a story and a project within the scope of what she's calling River Lab. So my first effort was during COVID. As Mary mentioned, we were all online and kind of focused on our own Piliina, our own connection to water bodies. And I've worked with many Kanaka artists on water projects here in Honolulu, and I wanted to kind of deepen my relationship to a particular watershed on Oahu, which is the Heia watershed. And it's very important on the east side of Oahu, which includes state repurchasing riverways from private owners, and then reestablishing the streams, replanting lo'i or wetlands of taro patches to reestablish Native Hawaiian traditional foodway systems, and also rebuilding the ancient fish ponds and tearing out the mangroves that clog the streams and the awai, which are the kind of canals the canals that allow water to flow from the stream through the lo'i and then back to the stream. And all of these native ecologies to flourish in this lokahi, or this balance between Aina, Kanaka, and Akua, or the gods in Hawaii. So through that time and kind of developing these kind of low-tech tools, which I think we're all kind of talking around, the way that River Lab introduces us to just kind of developing tools that with skills that we already have, whether it's writing or photography or kind of walking and interviewing folks, or building some kind of way to kind of engage your body and a sense of emotional connection and care and responsibility with the landscape. And so mine was, of course, writing too, like you, Jen. I'm focused on writing. And I was spending time there kind of helping with the lo'i and planting and building a new kind of taro processing plant. So while I was there, I kind of wrote these poems, these refrains for Heia, and kind of developing some ways to kind of connect with the energies there. And I developed a few poems, which you can see here. And so I kind of transformed that as part of the River Lab contribution in Anchorage. And through that project, I have been able to kind of transform that into a kind of pedagogy social practice platform of my own. And I love how Mary's enthusiasm and generosity kind of infuses all of the artists that she mentioned to develop their own watershed projects that are also collaboratively oriented. And so I've done that with Liquid Futures. And this is a project that I did, collaborated with my students where they design their own websites. And we kind of focused on celebrating the mo'o, who are the lizard protectors in Hawaii that are very famous for their the way that they protect but also share knowledge with bodies of water in Hawaii, and are related in a kind of morphological way to the backs or the vertebrae of the lizard as the vertebrae of the mountains that kind of holds the water, gathers the water, and allows it to flow through streams to the ocean. So they each developed their own website for that, which is on liquidfutures.org. And I collaborated here with a Native Hawaiian artist, Kanaka artist, Meliana Meyer, who helped workshop some potential large-scale murals with students that we use to then also develop the websites for their pieces. And as I'm scrolling through, we did lots of workshops on trying to think through what water wants, not just what we want for water, but what water wants. So all of these projects are kind of, I think, tangled together with my interest in gathering artists like Mary who model the best care practices for water through intercultural lenses that also honor place-based knowledge. And I think that kind of intersection is really important to me in bringing multiple audiences together, but in also learning from place and from the communities that know that knowledge of place so well. And building relationships methods for beginning with very small gestures to connect people together. And so I'm working on this book that includes Mary, but also 3 other artists featured in the exhibition in Anchorage, Carolina Casado and Martha Atienza as well. So I'm really happy in how these waters are flowing or confluencing with each other. So I just wanted to kind of end on the note of how important it's been for me to learn this collaborative space of operating and sharing art and watershed knowledge and passing it on. And I think the generosity of this project allows the generosity to flow into all of the contributions. And I am very thrilled by that. So I'll end there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jaimey. That was just a lovely note to kind of wrap things up on. I do feel that everything is just, one conversation leads to another, one relationship leads to another. And I love the tangled web of relationships that this project has created and the ways that many of the artists in the exhibition have connected through other realms and avenues. And it creates a really lovely momentum around all of these dialogues. So thank you, Mary, for creating this platform for everybody to connect. To start us off, I did want to just note for those tuning in, please don't be shy. Type any questions you have in the chat. We're all here and I'm excited to field questions from the audience. I have a bunch of questions, but I wanted to first ask any of the artists sharing if anything came up while folks were sharing their presentations that you wanted to start off with, or I'll go to my list. Nothing? Okay. So I wanted just first to ask Jen and Jenny as Alaska Native peoples in this discussion. I mean, I think one of the things that comes out of River Lab is really tangible. It's just the way that we are all interconnected and that there's so much kind of similarity in terms of the issues that we might be facing related to water, no matter where we are. But at the same time, speaking to some of the things that Jaimey talked about, there's this real emphasis on place-based knowledge and the importance of specificity of place. So I wondered if there was anything that either of you would like to share specifically about Alaska and Alaska waters and your relationship to those waters that maybe you think might be different or unique to start us off.
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts. First, I think it's important to remember that Alaska Native people are not a monolith, both across cultures and within them. With that in mind, I like to acknowledge that, like many Alaska Native people, I live and work and subsist on land that belongs to the Dena'ina. This is not my traditional homeland, and my work references and is informed by Dena'ina land as well as my traditional homeland on the North Slope of Alaska. Second, I think just to establish context, it's impossible to have a holistic conversation about environment or issues of climate without the presence of Indigenous people and Indigenous knowledge. We have existed as part of, and I say part of, not just in observation of Alaska's ecosystems for tens of thousands of years. And it's only in, recent centuries that Western culture has disrupted that balance. And I'd love to hear what Jenny has to say.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that, Jen. I kind of shared a little bit of that in my intro about being connected to land and place and being of water, sky, and land. But I also think about within that and thinking about place-based knowledge and thinking about storytelling and how Indigenous folks are inherently storytellers and using different mediums to share story, mine in particular, mostly photography. But I'm also been thinking about place is important to me and other Indigenous peoples, and thinking about how language holds stories of place, and thinking about our language and our worldview and how we talk about place, how we relate to place, shares a bit of our worldview. So while I cannot speak my language due to different forms of cultural erasure that has happened, I do know some words in the Nup'ak language has always referred to like you are in relation to this place. So where you are situated in that place, next to and such. I can't think of any specific examples right now, but I'm just really thinking about place and worldview. And my piece for the River Lab, thinking about this, what climate change, essentially has erased part of this land, this place where my late great-grandparents, used to bring in their fish nets, and I used to play as a child, and that place was always a space that I went to visit when I would go back home. That really connected me to my late great grandma. I've been thinking about, so how do we tell stories of place when that is gone, and this place-based knowledge, and how do we share that place-based knowledge with future generations? So I kind of asked this question as a call to action and thinking about the future, because so much of our stories are specific to our individual cultures. So like I'm Kingikmute, specific to the Wales region. I'm a Nup'ak, but my stories can be greatly different from a Nup'ak on the North Slope. But also thinking about how do we record stories and tell stories of a place when that place is gone for future generations, I think is something I've been really sitting with. And something that I do want to share that I think is really important to this topic is when I was visiting home last fall, I was speaking to Brandon Amasuk, and he's at Curator, which is a nonprofit in Nome. And he was sharing that within 100 years that Nome will be underwater. And so that really shook me, and thinking about like, so when this whole place where my ancestors had lived and thrived will be totally gone. So that's just something that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Jenny, there's our like emergent and pretty heavy and important things to be thinking about. I wonder for all of you, kind of coming out of what Jenny's talking about, specifically like thinking towards the future, all of you spoke really beautifully about how your relationship to others informed your thinking about your contribution to River Lab or your creation of the River Lab project in general. And since all of you wear a lot of different hats personally and professionally and work with on behalf and for lots of young people, I wonder if you might just speak a little bit about how those relationships inform your thinking about water in the future. And Jenny, I know you spoke too about your family, but you've also done a ton of work within the queer community in Alaska. And so I just want to kind of ask about maybe like a hopeful vision of where you all see your work as artists and educators positioning, you know, yourself vis-a-vis your students and others for the future, and stewarding place, you know, through that work. Sorry, that wasn't very articulate, but I'm trying to pull lots of things together.
Well, I just wanted to say that, Jenny, I thought that I'm still thinking about your question, like how do you tell stories of place when that place is gone? It's poignant and devastating and urgent, and it's making me think through, yeah, what your artwork is doing and does. And I think about, I mean, what maybe a question that you presented us with, Francesca, in before this panel, the hopeful question. Like I think about collaboration as the most hopeful part of like all the potential futures that I can imagine, and the building of coalitions through smaller scale collaborations. And I was also thinking about this quote. There's this, you may have heard of this person called Dr. John Francis, who was walked across the United States. Was from San Francisco and witnessed an ecological disaster and said, I'm not gonna take cars anymore, or I'm just going to be walking. And he was silent for the whole time he was walking across the US, and he ended up teaching a class through being silent the whole time and getting degrees. And he said something like, I think the quote is, sustainability is how we treat each other. And I have been thinking about that as a potential, like that's how I've been trying to frame future and working with young people. It's not only people, but it's also how we treat the water and how we treat all of the beings, right? And so I live with that quote. And when you asked the question too about sustainability, to tie all your questions together, that was what came to my mind. And like, it is a tricky word. And that's how I like to reconcile it, is with that, thinking about it as treating one another and reciprocity.
Jenny, maybe I can jump in here for just a sec before Jen wants to respond. I too am really struck by your question, and it's something that in collaborating with Kanaka artists comes up over and over again. And Kebulani Landgraf has a beautiful book of photography. It's a conceptual project about the building of H3, which tore down ancient heiaus and the landscape on Oahu. called the English part of the English title is Devastation Upon Devastation, right? The kind of the loss of land, but also the loss of culture and the kind of impact of colonial bureaucratic structures as well. And I feel like I've been so privileged to work with artists who both acknowledge the loss of land and language and culture, but also are really making an effort to try and regenerate that sense of relationship and culture from the fragments that do exist. And I think kind of acknowledging the fragmentation and the regeneration, the reestablishing of connection, and the continuation, the survivance of culture as part of that process too is really important. So Ke'ili, I just wanted to name them, Ke'ili Chan, Kapilani Landgraf, Liliana Meyer, Tiara Ribot, Nanea Lam, Bernice Akamine, Abigail Romanchuk. These are all amazing artists here that I've been working with doing that. And I think regeneration is a really important word for me because it signifies that sense of how much all of us, both Indigenous knowledge holders and also allies, have to work to reestablish the biocultural knowledge of place, and even learn again that knowledge, so that it can then inform UN policy and state policy where they're seeking that knowledge, but it's kind of not there. So we have to work from the community level and also on those larger UN platforms and state platforms too. So anyway, that's kind of a lot of what I've been thinking about, and maybe I'll turn it over to Jen. She might have something to contribute.
Yeah, so with this project, I obviously chose to focus on one individual, my daughter, but more broadly, I mean, subsequent generations are who I do climate activism for. Inupiaq people and queer people, but also just people in general. Going to Hope, I think Gen Z gives me a lot of hope. I did a little work with the Teen Climate Communicators group at the Anchorage Museum, and seeing these young people who are willing to tackle a lot of these issues head on is really great. Scientists have all of the information and the knowledge that we need to combat climate change. It's just a matter of overcoming the barriers to executing it. I like to think of my work as a form of reciprocity and giving a voice to things that don't have a voice, our non-human friends, or those places that are gone and therefore no longer have a voice, those people who are gone and no longer have a voice. And so I guess my relationship is, I view myself sort of as a torchbearer. And that includes my culture and any traditional knowledge I've regained. And that includes the planet as well.
That's really lovely, Jen. I think it resonates very strongly. I don't know if you've seen the salmon culture exhibition that's up at the museum right now, but some of the artists within that show spoke about speaking on behalf of the salmon, which for those tuning in who don't know are in major crisis in parts of Alaska. And so I thought that was a really beautiful gesture to say, we're talking for them because they can't communicate in that way with humans. I also love what you all have raised in terms of the different terms you're thinking about. One thing that we've gotten into with some of the other artists in this exhibition is around this term sustainability, and thinking about what it means to have a sustainable practice as an artist, as a museum worker, as an academic. What does that look like? And some of the artists have pushed back. I mean, I feel like we're in this moment also with climate change where we're experiencing things that we don't have the words for yet. And so sustainability feels like this clunky word where everybody knows kind of what we mean by that, but it's an imperfect word. to talk about many of the ideas that we're trying to get at, like Mary talking about sustainability is how we treat each other. You have this kind of like cold term sustainability, but really you're talking so much more about like this relationality. And so other words that artists have floated is reciprocity. Carolina Caicedo said that sustaining was how she thought of her practice. So I wondered if, you know, we've thrown out some terms here, but if each of you might just comment briefly as we wrap up here on like now and into the future, what does it mean to you to have a sustainable or a sustaining or a, to be in reciprocity as an artist, as a scholar, as a community member? Or are there other words we should add to the list? I have regeneration on here too, Jaimey. So thank you for that.
So, Fran, I think my suspicion or my kind of distance from sustainability has been in the way that it gets adopted by large scale or international discourses, where it just becomes an economic transaction. And I'm reading like it's a heavy week, and especially since the COP conversations are going on and this term unabated is going around, and kind of thinking about like how the oil companies are kind of driving the conversation about sustainable practices, which means not doing anything about oil. So I kind of distance myself from that term. And I think whether we use sustainability or not, I think for me, ultimately, when we're using regeneration or reciprocity or sustainability, that sense of responsibility has to be in there too, that sense of care and an ethical kind of tie and connection to family, community, environment. And in Hawaii, kuleana is that term that kind of defines both. It's deeply rooted in land and aina, but is also a kind of relationship building through community and with the elements as well. And I think that's what's so hard to have a conversation about right now, is that sense of like how you actually have responsibility for things rather than just ownership for things. So I just want to put that word in circulation to responsibility.
Thanks for that, Jaimey. Gives me a lot to think about. Any other thoughts as we close out?
I'll share a little bit because I really like what Mary was saying about being in relationship and reciprocity, because I think that's a really important part of my art practice. And I've been thinking about, when you shared that question, Fran, about sustainability, I've been thinking about my art practice over the past 3 years and how to have a sustainable art practice. I think that also is thinking about self-care as an artist. And many of us are thinking about these really tough topics that also impact, you know, our family, the lands and waters that we live on or near. And so I think care is a big thing. But I've also been thinking about how to continue to make work that aligns with my values as an artist and a Nubiak person. So thinking about this idea of always giving back, being in like having reciprocal relations, and not always taking. So this comes to mind when I'm thinking about certain stories. You know, I hold a lot of power with the camera. So I also think about that and think about what is my story to tell and what is mine to hear and listen and learn from. And I've also been thinking about how I always have to incorporate joy and experimentation in my art practice. And I've been thinking a lot about what does research look like to me? And research is such an important part of my art practice. But also thinking about research in terms of rest and care again. And my research can be in the form of looking at photo books, spending time with elders and listening and learning, journaling, sketching images. But also with that comes the responsibility, I feel, is to teach, mentor, and give back when I can. So I'm always really, really grateful when younger Alaska Native or Indigenous folks interested in photography reach out, or if I get to have even a small conversation with them. But I just want to end with this idea of, as an Indigenous person, I'm, my kin is the land, waters, and oceans, and, the plants, the animals, and everything, because I am of place, like I shared earlier. And I think that if everyone kind of looks at the future and thinks about how they are in relation with each other, with place, with our non-human kin, then hopefully that will walk in a better way and be able to care for each other, because I think care is a huge part of what's needed in the future.
Jen or Mary, anything you want to add in here?
I think that was beautifully worded. Hashtag land back.
I think that's a great point to end on.
Wonderful. I agree. Thank you all for being here. It was such a beautiful conversation, and I really appreciate your time and all that you contributed to the exhibition and to this conversation and to your communities.
Thank you.
Yeah, Thank you.